Get started. Om. 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 Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavatam Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandathami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamayah Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetam Rutaduhe Namaha Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutaha Stunvanti Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangapadakramopanisadaihi Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyana Vastita Tatkatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yoginaha Yasyantam Navidusura Suraganaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So we are on the 6th chapter. We are, I think, in the 4th lecture today. And this chapter is very important from a point of view of the fact that it describes one of the most important concepts which has emerged out of our own Sanatana Dharma, which is on Dhyanam or meditation. So meditation, as you will see in this chapter, is shown as a practice. It is shown as actually a practice in any spiritual journey. It is not really portrayed as the highest form of what we all know as meditation, and our reflection time is going to dwell a little bit on this. But the whole idea is, if we have this practice the way it is listed out in this chapter, then it makes our next level, which is Shravanam, which is listening, much more easier and much more focused. So in that sense, this chapter is actually very important for even a lay person, even somebody, a youngster who wants to come and study about Bhagavad Gita. So this chapter literally goes into, just like we have Dinacharya, we call Dinacharya, and I'm using one word, a Sanskrit word here, which is our daily routine. So, in our sense of daily routine, we do a lot of things, which is, keeping ourselves clean and, feeding our body with food at the right times, feeding our mind with the right kind of thoughts, in this day or age of social media, for example, bringing the mind back to focus is a very important aspect. And in that sense, too, chapter 6 is very important. Of course, the ultimate reason for chapter 6 here is to remind ourselves of our true nature and what and how does meditation really help us get there. So you will see Bhagwan Sri Krishna giving a very, very exhaustive and an elaborate view of this chapter of meditation here. So with that in mind, in our reflection time, I'm just going to open up today to ask you your thought on what is meditation. Just something for us to, reflect on. As much as we always think we know what this word meditation is, it is always, as I articulate out, to that extent, my mind is sort of becoming stirrer on truly what meditation is. So what do you all think? What does meditation mean to you? And the best part about this is that whatever you say, all the answers are 100% correct. There is nothing, no wrong answers in meditation. That is
controlling our senses and our mind and making it one-pointed, so it's quietened down, so we get trying that no thoughts come, but it doesn't happen like this, but trying that so that we can still ourselves for some time and think about who we actually are.
beautiful. You said a lot of things, controlling our mind and senses, and then making our mind calm, and then trying to see how I can get rid of other thoughts, and ultimately realizing what our true nature is. So I think we are done with this chapter, Meenu. We can be pretty much, that is exactly what this whole thing is saying about. Very nice. Any other things to add to what Meenu already said?
It's easier said than done, though.
Easier said than done. That is also so true.
I think from a practical aspect, if we were to kind of start at the basic level, I feel meditation is just being having that one-pointed focus on any task you do. Like, for example, I say when a young child is painting or spending hours learning music or dance, just perfecting every little move or surtal, just like a musical instrument, that is, like we say, sadhana, right? Doing your sadhana. So I think that is like a basic level of meditation. I always see that in the children when they are doing something that they absolutely love. I feel that's when you, and not forced, not with force, but just from within, having that drive to do something and just being having that one-pointed focus is truly feels like meditation.
Meditation, exactly. Very well said. You are 100% correct. This chapter, in that sense, right from the first shloka onwards, it is trying to give you that idea of how do I bring that focus in music? How do I bring that focus when I'm studying? How do I bring the focus when I'm driving? All these things. What are the aspects that is needed because ultimately it is these factors, like you pointed out, Beena, whether it's music, whether it is all these other activities, it is in and through practice of the techniques which is given in this chapter, for example, in those activities is what will allow me to become a better meditator, which then I use it towards what Meenu finally said as the ultimate goal, which is to find my own true self. How do I really find that true self of who I am? Is that if in day-to-day life, if I don't get to practice it, there is never a chance that I'm going to go to that highest level of meditation. So that is, in a sense, what we are trying to say is at the highest level, it is that effortless awareness of one's true self which of course we should not forget in this chapter. But the reason why we are unable to do so is because presently we have learned, and I don't know, this is something for all our grandchildren, which, as you all as grandmothers from the beginning can start to inculcate, is, how can we slowly bring our grandchildren away from the sense of the fact that I am this body. We have learned to identify ourselves with this body. And when the child is young, we pamper the body, we pamper the minds and everything. But that by itself, at some point, we have to unlearn, correct? And that unlearning is what is becoming so difficult for us. Unlearning the fact that I'm this body, I'm this mind, I'm so great, and I do my job so well. It can be anything. It can be at work, or it can be even as a mother. In fact, sometimes as a mother is where the most difficulty is, actually, because we do our job, we take our job as a mother so seriously, and we do such a great job of it. But at that point in time, any small thing which goes against what I think is my duty as a mother, then it starts to affect me. So at the ultimate level, ultimate sadhana, as you pointed out, Beena, ultimate sadhana or tapasya for us is when I can even forget that I'm a mother, I think that's the biggest, most difficult part of it. But that is where this meditation chapter truly leads us from my identification of myself to who I think I am, to that aspect of who I'm actually not, but I am that ultimate self. So that is this chapter all about. And just that I simply love this quote, because every time I look at it, and it reminds me of why I'm not able to get there, because of my own mind, which is so restless. The mind which plays such a crucial role in this entire sense, the thing. And when Meenu said about my senses and the mind, ultimately my senses are my doorways in which I'm gathering every impression and which is making sense in me. And this mind just is acting as the machine which is processing all these thoughts and everything. So it plays really one of the most crucial roles in our human life. So we may think, my strength of character lies in how strong I am and how, I always think about this TED talk, this lady gives this power pose. You have to practice this power pose at work, and you have to practice this power pose. We think that is where my strength is, in practicing my physical sense. But that physical sense is really reflected by how restless my mind is. So in every walk of my life and everything, I have to sort of know that I'm playing a role, but within myself, I'm actually that absolute calmness. It's like this ocean, which is showing all the waves on the top, but at the bottom, it's so calm. So I have to think I am that calm self. I am that calm self. I cannot allow that to be disturbed. When I go through that kind of a mode outside, then there are no waves on the top. That can be reflected. It's like the inside out strategy. I'm using again a very corporate word, corporate term here, the outside in versus inside out. The strategy in the corporate world is used where the outside in means where I'm waiting for all my customers to give me feedback and input, and then I change my product for their needs, But the inside out strategies, I know what my strength or the core skills of who I am, and I go to the outside and project that sense of who I am outside. That's the inside out strategy. And again, maybe because of my past life in the corporate, is Apple. Why was Apple so successful? Because they told the world that this is what you need. The world was not really asking for an iPod or an iPhone or even an i14 or i15, what is coming out, but they were able to convince this world. So if they can do it in a corporate world, why can't we as individuals do the same thing, isn't it? We can be the calm self and then project that. But then in this world, how many people do this? I don't know. It's not even 1% of the 5 billion population or something we have. It's 0.001, right? And that's where I don't know, I feel so grateful to have this opportunity to be able to be next to the Bhagwan Shankaracharya's Illam, who was one of those 0.001% who was able to transform the world by the inside out strategy, bringing that knowledge of the Shastras to all of us. And with that strength of character in him in this 15 years of his life, 15, 16 years of his life, he transformed the world and continues to do so. And through this Bhashyas of Bhagavad Gita, which really brings that aspect of really who I am. So I just wanted to give that small introduction to this chapter of what this chapter is really about and the strength of why this chapter is important for everybody, particularly our youngsters. So this chapter is really, the key thing about this is to understand what the vision of this person who I am, who is meditating. What is my vision as a meditator? So as a meditator today, I view all the objects, people, situations, with a high sense of restlessness, with the sense of what is it that is there for me. But in a sense, those objects, situations at work, in my family life, everything has been given so that I practice that calmness, that what Meenu said, that calmness is what every situation is giving me that opportunity. Every day when I get up in the morning, I have to tell myself, so how many such situations are going to come where I'm going to practice this calmness, where I'm not going to see the others as different from me, where I'm seeing everybody as nothing but my own self. So that is the aspect which you will see that we are coming to this end of that first section, which is basically perfecting myself. It started with the first chapter with Arjuna thinking that he is an ego, to this chapter where Krishna is finally trying to give him the practice sessions on where he starts to look inward. So that is why it is called yoga of self-abidance, knowing who I am and abiding in my true nature. So it starts off because in Shloka 1 is the continuation in chapter 5. In chapter 5, Arjuna was taught about the concepts of who is truly a yogi or a karma yogi and who is a sannyasa. So that two aspects were brought out. And therefore, you will see in Shloka 1, he had talked about how sa sannyasi cha yogi cha na cha niragnir na cha akriyaha. A karma yogi is a person who is an action person. A sannyasi is a person who is an actionless person. So, but then Arjuna had confused those two terms, and Krishna feels that he has to come back and explain to Arjuna truly what Sir Sannyasi and Yogi cha, which is who's a sannyasi and who's a karma yogi, and ultimately saying that a yogi who is a meditator. Okay, so this word yogi here refers to the person who is who's going into this practice of meditation. That person needs to carry with him or her, as he sits on this meditation seat, the aspects of a karma yogi and a sannyasa yogi. So a karma yogi is a person who is practicing, who's acting in this world without any desires, or not, I'm sorry, not without desire, where he has to give up his attachment to the fruits of action, and further on focusing on the fact that he's not even this person, he's giving up his ego. Now, how can that happen? How can a karma yogi really practice that? That can happen only when he practices the sannyasi aspect, the sannyasi lakshana, which is giving up, renunciation of his desires. So that is why they both go together. And when that two go together, such a person becomes a perfect meditator or a yogi. So that is why this shloka is important to say that, a sannyasi's renunciation of desires has to be coupled with a karma yoga's acting in the world without the sense of ownership. So that action has to be there. It is not actionless, but action has to be there. Yet renunciation should be there. These two aspects allows a meditator to be a perfect meditator. And then in shloka 2, again, he's trying to say that itself is called renunciation. Know that to be yoga. He who has not renounced imagination does not become a dhyani, does not become a yogi. So here the key aspect he's trying to show is that renunciation, just like we say, location for a real estate. Here aspect is renunciation. That is the key part of it. And again, the word takes a very powerful meaning because of the word sankalpa in this shloka. Because on one hand, we may say that I don't have desires. Or I may say that, I don't want to do any more action. I'm done with everything. Now I'm just going to retire and I'm going to sit in a room and I'm going to meditate. I can say that. But guess what? Even without any objects, without anything, you can literally have a room, and I can have that in this room here, but yet I can tell you I'm not a perfect meditator. I'm not even a meditator, because the minute I try to quieten my mind, there are all kinds of thoughts that come to our mind. And that is what he is cautioning us, is sankalpaha. Sankalpaha is meaning very, Gurudev uses the word fanciful imagination. So fanciful, indicating that, it is not that I have to absolutely do it, but my mind brings that glamour into why a particular thought needs to be acted on immediately. So that is why this word fanciful imagination is brought here. And that is why that sannyas aspect is very important for a meditator. That is why this word yam sannyasam iti prahuhu. So Krishna is cautioning Arjuna here, and he's trying to say that you think you're going to run away to the Himalayas and become this yogi, but that cannot happen because in your mind, you still have too much amount of sankalpa, and that needs to be brought to a close. So this is why we put this up last time, that we might sit for meditation, but we have all these thoughts here. So that is why in shloka number 3, Krishna starts to give the various practices, and he clearly says there are 2 aspects which one person has to know the level at which he has to go. One is this aspect of, first of all, wanting to actually do this meditation. So that is the Arurukshuhu. Arurukshuhu is clearly somebody who is recognizing, of course, the intent in this shloka is the fact that a meditator who has recognized that this world is really inert, there is no more thing in it to chew, such a person is a seeker. But the same thing we can actually use even in our daily life as a way of guidance is somebody who has been, like, for example, again, Swami Tejomayananda gives a beautiful example. Like, of course, this is an Indian example, but it can be used, which is for somebody who is living in the slums, and whatever the condition of the slums is, the person is just within the slums area. Maybe we could think about like the Dharavi slums or something, which is huge city of slums, where people have been living there for such a long time. and they are content with how things are going. For such a person, they may not even want to go to the next level. But suppose a person from Dharavi actually goes to maybe Chowpatty or something in Mumbai, or for that matter, even in New York or Detroit, we have somebody who is going from the inner city and who is finally coming to somewhere like Bloomfield Hills or something. That person is now a seeker from that level. But whatever that thing is, he's bringing this aspect of that, the fact there are two levels. One is an Arurukshuhu, who has recognized that a person has to change. And here the word Munihi is used, which is a contemplative person, referring to the person who is going beyond objects, situations, and everything. So such a person, then when such a person reaches the yoga ruda, that is, he has reached that calm state. For that person, inaction is a means. For some person who has now sought after that state of meditation and who's been practicing meditation and who is extremely comfortable, only for such a person, inaction is necessary. For that kind of a person, it is not needed to get into the world and try to use his ambitions to satisfy things and everything. So this is what pictorially I showed this last time as somebody who is seeking out. I mean, Google is so good, you can get these messages. Now you see this person is contemplating and looking at, okay, what do I do next? To ultimately the person who has ridden. And we saw last time about how this is a case with anything that can be applied, not just by riding on a horse or a bike or driving a car, but it can be even simple at work. When I recognize that if I have to do something very perfectly, what are all the things that I need to do? What are all the aspects that will allow me to become? That person is a seeker who wants perfection. And I think my internet is slightly unstable here. And then you see finally, yoga ruda is ultimately when you've reached that state, one just have to perform, and it's actually sometimes a very beautiful feeling, because if one has learned the skills very well of anything, there is actually no stress. So this aspect of Arurukshuhu is a very important step, where if one just knows that one is playing a role, and for that role, these are all the elements that is required. And when the person spends the time to do the effort for the role, which is what Karma Yoga is all about, then the second step of playing the role is very easy. So then it's just a question of playing to oneself and not playing to the tunes of others, So that is the beauty of this. So this is, I put pictorially about the control. We saw that last time. So we move on to Shloka 4 here, which is trying to say that ultimately where the mind was compared to the horse, when I say that the mind is ultimately under my control, then what happens is I do all my duties really perfectly well. And that can happen only when my mind is totally under control. And that is why that Arurukshuhu is a beautiful word which tells you to achieve that level. And that's why in this shloka we did Yadahi nendriyartheshu na karma svanushajjate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yoga rudhas tadochyate. So uchyate, meaning it is said that only when neither the sense objects nor to action then a man is attached. And again here, as much as it says the sense objects, indriyartheshu, ultimately it is the mind which leads one to the sense objects. So when that mind is controlled, and in that controlled situation where the mind does not go to the sense objects, not to any action, and also having renounced that sankalpa, only then such a person is eligible for meditation. So he's given the three conditions to be satisfied. One is not the Shama and Dama. And we were given these examples of Costco and everything before, is the ability of not doing window shopping, not doing mindless shopping, none of those things. And not to action is man attached, again, by way of desire or ambition, that kind of thing. And having renounced any future undertakings, I will do this, like we talked about the bucket list and everything, or wanting to satisfy something in the future. If I'm able to give these three things, then and only then am I eligible to be a meditator. So very, very powerful, which is why I completely agree with you, Meenu, very hard to do, be a meditator, because in each one of them, literally, we can come up with an action plan on, and we have another month to think about it, so that 2023 January, we can put that into motion, because we all do this. As soon as the new year comes, we say, okay, I'm going to meditate every day. But we need this, in sports, they always start back before they actually come to the line from where they're going to sprint. So now we have the 6 weeks or 5 weeks we have, hopefully, where we can think about what are all the things that I'm going to give up, so that in New Year's time, when I'm going to do my meditation, I can actually, I know very well that I will be able to put my mind into meditation. So, any thoughts so far before we go to the two most important shlokas of this chapter, Okay, so let's move on. So ultimately, the mind has to be controlled. I have to look at my worldly duties as a way to lift myself up and do that to the best of my control. Only then I can give up my sankalpa. So I don't know if I put this up last time, but, here's this poor person who is saying that, all this, what you're saying, oh God, what you're saying is absolutely true. I totally agree with this. But can you really help me? That's what he's asking. So he says, I am right there, hey buddy, I'm there to help you, but, you have to do everything yourself. That is the part of it that we are coming to the next shlokas. And since I'm here and I know how it is that we're going to donors, this whole university is funded on, very kind donors who have seen the vision of what this university can do. And in this process, when we go for donations, this is just a joke, but we go to a lot of funding agencies too, and the funding agencies will always ask, so who's your partner in this? How much do you have? And suppose I tell them, well, I do have about 50,000 rupees or something, if I'm looking for a lakh donation, I have this one. So, the funding agency, well, you have so much, why don't you just start with that? And you're going to come to a lakh anyway, so why are you coming to me, So that's what I feel about this joke, which is, God is saying, well, I'm up here for you, but you better do something yourself, So that's why the shloka is important. Uttharedatmanatmanam natmanam avasadhayet atmaiva hyatmano bandhuhu Atmaiva ripuratmanaha. So he's saying uddharet. Uddharet, that is, lift yourself. What are you trying to lift yourself? Atmanam, your own self. Lift your own self. Atmana. Atmana, by yourself. So lift yourself by your own self. Na atmanam avasadayet. Very, very important. We'll spend a little time to discuss this. Na atmanam avasadayet, which is, I think, again, an important phrase as far as our youngsters are concerned, which is where we see a lot of issues these days. So, na atmanam avasadiyet, one should not neither lower yourself, one should not try to, degrade yourself, or one should not, kind of bring yourself down. None of that is necessary. So, na atmanam avasadiyet. Why? Because somebody may say, how really can you do that? Okay, you were saying that, let a man lift himself by oneself, let him not really lower. But then how is that possible? So he offers this thing saying that, it is ultimately you do it with your mind, because the mind itself is your friend, and the mind itself can be an enemy. So you're your own friend and your own worst enemy. So that is the idea which he's trying to say here. So very, again, beautiful shloka, because ultimately he's trying to say there is nobody else who can come to your help. Like it's, even when we go to a doctor, and I had one instance which happened in my own family, which I think I mentioned last time, but I'm not sure, which, you're trying to take a consultation with, you go to a particular doctor and the doctor says, well, you have to have a surgery immediately. And then you are worried, okay, what do I do? And you go to a second doctor for an opinion, and the second doctor takes you to a third doctor, and you get all these opinions and you get so confused. What am I really supposed to do here? And it is even more confusing when finally the last doctor tells you, well, I've given you all this. Now, what do you think? What do you think you're going to do? And it happened in my family, and the person was, I came to you for an answer for my this. That is why I've been going from one doctor to another doctor to another doctor. And now you're telling me what do you think? It was a little sad, but ultimately the onus is upon us. We have to decide for ourselves. And how do we do that? And that is, again, the biggest issue, isn't it? If we don't have this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, this Vedanta, we will never ever know that there are actually two opposing forces in our mind. We won't know that. And in many sense, the meditation is the platform which will actually expose us to these two opposing forces in our mind. In our own mind, we go through this confusion. One part is saying something, and the other part is saying something else. And that drama can play in our head for all the time, not just when I'm in meditation, but also when I'm acting in the world. So these two opposing forces just drags me down like anything and pulls me down. So the first step is where I don't even know I had these two opposing forces going on. I just go with the flow of how the mind is taking me. And, and I just sometimes my life goes up, sometimes my life goes down, and I go with that flow. But at some point, when I sit for meditation and I spend a little time thinking, you do get that kind of that light to wait a minute. There is something going on here. Sometimes the mind is like this, sometimes the mind is different. That itself shows that there are two aspects to the mind. One is the negative and the other one is a positive. So how do I leverage these two parts of it? And that is what the shloka is trying to show, that if I pay clean attention, that same mind can be my friend, but that same mind can also be my enemy. And this is really what causes all this restlessness. And this restlessness is the one that we need to have control over, in this meditation. The lower mind is like this deceptive mind. It wants you to go down, sink down. But the higher mind is the one which is the kind of an aspiring mind. It wants you to go up and up and up. It is trying to show you that ladder of steps on how you can go up. So at any situation, you have this aspiring mind and this deceptive mind acting against each other. And this is the part he's trying to tell us to be cautious about and to allow that aspiring mind to pull the deceptive mind up. Interestingly, this whole thing, in Viveka Chudamani, I don't know if any of you remember the shloka here. Shankaracharya has taken this concept and he has shown how this Uddharedatmanatmanam is important to reach that yoga ruda state. Uddharedatmanatmanam magnam samsara varidhau yoga rudatvam asadhya samyak darshana nishtaya. So having attained that yoga ruda state, one should recover himself. Why? Because we are constantly immersed in the sea of birth and death. Samsara varidha. Samsara varidha is this ocean of birth and death. And the only way you can do it is by means of devotion to right discrimination. Devotion to right discrimination. Yoga rudatvam asadhya samyak darshanam nishtaya. Nishtaya being completely rooted in this aspect of being rooted to this aspiring mind. So that is the aspect which he's trying to show here about not going down at all and just focusing our attention there. So you are your own friend, you're your own enemy. Atmaiva bandhuratma, atmaiva hi ripuratmanaha. Ripuhu meaning this enemy. You are your own worst enemy because we ourselves are really our own enemy. Nobody else out there. It's so powerful because now we don't have to blame anyone. If anything is going wrong, I'm the one who's at fault. So very powerful from that point of view. But we'll come to that. Na atmanam avasadeyet. So that atmana, he's explained about 7 times atmanam, referring to us. Also, the second atmanam refers to jiva. Atma, referring to the higher mind. Atmanaha, of the jiva. Atmana, of the mind, of the atmanaha, the mind of the jiva. And here this word atma can refer to either the high mind or the lower mind, and atmana again jiva. So he's just trying to show how it is used 7 times, but in the 7 times, 4 times he's referring to is of the lower mind of the jiva, atma, indicating that we ourselves are that higher self, and sometimes we are the lower self, and it's only by hitching ourselves to the higher mind can I uplift the lower mind. So that is the 2 opposing forces. One is the aspiring and the other one is the destructive mind. And to constantly be aware of how to establish myself in the higher mind and not allow the lower mind to take us down. So the jiva can choose to use the higher mind, and the higher mind can allow us to finally understand my higher self. But for the same jiva, when the jiva tries to, that jiva referring to each one of us, where I allow myself to, get into this destructive state or anything, if you will, to that state, I allow myself to not allow myself to get to that level of sensuality. So that is what he's trying to show here. But this word, na atmanam avasa, I wanted to point out here, na atmanam avasadiyet, let him not lower himself, which is so powerful because this in this day and age, these terminologies, like, I don't know if you're aware of this, inside, what is that? Imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is, I think, na atmanam avasade, it really refers to some extent. I was thinking about this terminology of imposter syndrome. It is essentially a condition that many of the teenagers today go through it, which is they're actually, they have a lot of skills and talents, but they, in spite of having these talents and skills, when somebody were to praise them or whatever, that you're doing such a good job, they don't want to accept it. They feel they're really not capable. They're not, how do you say this? They don't feel they deserve that praise or anything. Have you seen that, or have you experienced this in any of the youngsters? They keep pushing themselves more and more and more, mainly because they feel that they're not worth whatever they are in terms of the skills and talents. Now, if you really, if each one of us know what I'm capable of and have a complete good feeling of what it is, then we will be able to accept any kind of criticism or anything in a right manner. But sometimes when we use a criticism to say, you know what, this really means that I'm not worth, or I'm worthless, or I'm not really worth what people are trying to say. That whole imposter syndrome is taking a big, I see so many articles on this. In fact, a couple of years ago, it was even bigger. Now, I don't know what the syndrome is of this 2022, but in a sense, the whole idea is that not to lower himself. Each and every person has their own talent. The question is, how can I use this talent to move forward? So the mind is a culprit for all this. The mind itself is a way to move forward. Any thoughts on this before we go to the next one?
The imposter syndrome, I don't know about that, but you're right about kids. I don't know if it is they're putting the pressure on themselves, or are we putting, as a society, we are putting the pressure on the kids. I don't know, but you can see the level of the level at which they're pushing themselves. Let's put it that way. They are pushing themselves to an extent that it is both amazing and scary at the same time, if that's something that we can use. It's amazing that a human being, a child of this age, can do so much, but at the same time scary in the sense that, is this child overdoing it, or is it within their capacity? That's something that
Correct.
that is something definitely we are seeing. I mean, I'm a preschool independent of parents teacher, and there is a child in my class who is chanting the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, in one sense, it is amazing that that smaller child is chanting, but I'm hoping and praying that it is because of the natural talent and not because the parents pressurizing the child. So it's like I'm both happy and at the same time proud and everything, but at the same time a little nervous, and praying and hoping that it is because of the child's natural interest and not because parents pressurizing the kid to learn or something. So it's and this is a 4-year-old child, so that's something that really caught my eye. Was real as you were talking about it. That is something that really stuck in my head. We don't know whether we are pushing. Is it because of us or is it inherent to the child? We don't know. That is something I definitely
Correct.
see.
Right. So, I mean, clearly in this shloka, the reference, of course, is to an individual meditator who's asked to not lower himself or herself or degrade himself or herself, or kind of push ourselves unnecessarily, but to keep lifting myself up, because the mind has a capacity to lower himself or herself. But what you're pointing out, Suvarna, is that how the individual is reacting to the external influences and is allowing themselves to lower themselves. So that is important. And so the emphasis is a lot on oneself here. Coming to in the area of teenagers, why I bring this up is that you're right, the teenagers, they have a great potential to rise, but the caution which you brought up in that example of the child is how much is the young adults, how much are young adults really focusing on their potential and rising up, and or are they doing it because they are pressurized either through external circumstances, which is playing into their own mind, where the mind is telling them that they have to rise up, So this whole, that is why these shlokas of 5 and 6 are so crucial to understand in its essence. So that way this can offer a guidance to young adults. And of course, for us as meditators and seekers to going towards higher goals, in both the instances, these two shlokas are really trying to point out that the problem does not lie outside. The problem is inside. The problem is our own mind. Our own mind needs to be given enough knowledge and conviction, and has to develop the conviction. But the question then comes is, how much am I open to this knowledge? That is where the problem is.
Yeah, I mean, talking to the parent, this whole thing came up because the parent, they were saying that are going to be out of town, and I think they're traveling to India. And if there's some homework that I was going to give the child, I was like, this kid is already chatting Bhagavad Gita. I'm not about to give you any homework. Just, but I was like, the whole time I was talking to the parent, I put literally myself in the parent's shoes, and I was like, oh my God, what did I do at that time? And I cannot judge that parent, because I probably did the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, this reflection time is like, okay, I did that. Now I know I did that. So what can I do next?
Yeah.
To stop myself from doing that. That's
Correct.
all at this point.
Correct. So maybe in here, the shloka could be also is independently, when I'm in the midst of something, how can I view the situation to see how I'm being calm and how I'm allowing myself to lift from maybe trying to judge a situation to trying to see how best can I help and do my duty well as a teacher, for example. So the next shloka is the twin shloka to the next previous one, where he's trying to say, what will happen if you don't do that? In the previous shloka, he says, the mind itself is your friend and the mind itself is your enemy, right? So here he's doing Bandhuratmatmanastasya Bandhuratmatmanastasya Yenatmaivatmana jitaha Yenatmaivatmana jitaha Anatmanastu shatrutve Anatmanastu shatrutve Vartetatmaiva shatruvat Vartetatmaiva shatruvat. So he's saying As much as in the previous shloka you said that the mind is your friend and the mind is your enemy, how so? How does the mind be a friend to me? And how does the mind be an enemy to me? What makes this mind a friend? What are the qualities of the mind which makes the person, that mind, to be my friend? And what are the qualities of the mind which can make that same mind as an enemy? So that's what the shloka is trying to show. So bandhuhu, which is a friend, bandhuhu is a bandhu, the mind itself is a friend of oneself. Bandhuhu atma, atmana tasya, for that person, that mind itself is a friend. Bandhuhu atma atmana tasya, yena atma eva atmana jitaha. So that person who has used his own mind to conquer, for the mind is a friend of oneself, for him whose mind is conquered by the self. So he who has conquered his own mind by himself, for that person, that mind is a friend. But for that same person, anatmanaha tu shatrutve. So anatmanaha, so for one who has not conquered himself, but for somebody who has not used his mind to conquer himself, for such a person, that same mind is a shatru. Shatru, or a person who is an enemy, So shatrutve, anatmana tu shatrutve, varteta atma eva shatrutvam. But to the unconquered mind, as an enemy stands the same self like an external foe. So for such a person who has not done this sadhana of controlling the mind, for that person, that mind is an enemy. So clearly pointing out again, as much as we chant Uddare Datmanatmanam so much as a way of saying that you can lift yourself by yourself. In English language, there is this other thing, lift yourself by your own bootstraps, right? So that is what shloka 5 is. But I think this shloka is really the sadhana part of it, which is trying to say that ultimately I need to work upon myself a lot to control my mind. So controlling mind is the most important thing, which he's trying to say, because only when I'm controlling my mind, that kind of a mind is my friend. And if I don't control myself, that same mind is my enemy. So that is ultimately what he's trying to show here. And here again, the word Atma is used 6 times. Again, the word Atma and Atmana. Basically that Atmana, Atma and Atmana. I think that, and Atmanaha. 3 different usages of Atma grammatically. If anybody is interested, we can go into grammar part of it. But I know, Meenu, probably with your grammar skills, you'll be able to figure out among the Vibhaktis, how does Atma Vibhakti, maybe we should go through the Atma Vibhakti. So, mind is a good slave, but a bad master. That is something we need to keep in mind, It's like if I'm driving on the highway and, I may be driving a Lamborghini or something which has got all the bells and whistles. Now, if I really use all those bells and whistles of Lamborghini to drive the car, it can easily become my own enemy. So I have to be very careful on how I'm using my Lamborghini. So too with my own mind, is that mind is like that Lamborghini. It is the possibility to go literally to the worst possible ways or to the best ways. It's up to me on how I use that. And I think of the same thing with my iPhone, iPhone is it is loaded. It can do so much. It can take the best pictures. And I do that here all the time. We use my phone to take some of the best pictures in my group and all that. But at the same time, I can use that same iPhone to load the worst kind of programs or anything and to spoil myself. That is what he's coming to. So shloka number 7, I'm just going to introduce this verse here. I mean, just to say what it's going to talk about. It's basically, we're leading so towards finishing all the justifications as to why I have to conquer my mind. That is what these shlokas have all been so far. So here he's just saying, Jitatmanaha prashantasya paramatma samahitaha shita ushna sukha dukheshu tata manapamanayoho. Many of these words have come before in chapters 2 through 4, I think. But essentially, ultimately, he's saying that a person who has conquered the mind, only such a person can actually see the other side of the coin, which is where that same coin is full of peace and balance and everything. And all that can be obtained only when the mind is conquered. So let's stop here. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kasyat dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Thank you, everyone. And let me stop the thing here.